Welcome to the Icebox for today's City of Gainesville City Commission workshop on the part of the GRU budget. We have had several of these workshops thus far. This is not the first time. I would like everybody to note that we do have many discussions about both the general government budget and the utilities budget, and they've been ongoing since March, I want to say, maybe earlier. So I don't want anybody caught off guard when we get to September and start actually passing things. The opportunity to have discussions about this has been broad and extensive. So that said, Madam Clerk.
Yes, we have adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. We have motion and second to adopt the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Welcome, Commissioner Sacco. So that passed unanimously. We have an agenda. Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to have to step out of the meeting for a few minutes, but I will be in my office.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk.
Yes, we have item 2023-725 GRU fiscal year 24 proposed operations and maintenance and capital budgets for operational departments with the recommendation that the City Commission hear presentations from staff.
Mr. Manager.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, thanks for that introduction, because you're absolutely right. So staff begins working on the budget really over a year ago. In December of 2022 is when staff begins working on the budget. Then we started to have workshops with the commission starting in February. We've had several of those. Brett's going to go over a few more of those in detail. What today's is really focused on is several commissioners have asked for more detail in our operations budgets. And so what today is focused on is our operations budget, both O&M and capital. And what I want to highlight, and you'll probably hear it multiple times from several people presenting, is we do a couple things with our budget. One, if you all remember, especially new commissioners, you all were in office, I think, 8 days, and we had a meeting where we went over our strategic plan on January 13th. And in that strategic plan, it lays out the goals of the commission, and those were reaffirmed. And so what we want to make sure when we put our budget forth is the things that we're doing as a utility fit into the 5 main goals of the city commission. So that is one thing that we will make sure we're clearly tying to. And then the other thing is that this budget, presenting this portion of the budget that's submitted today and being presented today, fits into the debt reduction plan that we talked about back in April of bringing down our debt over the next 10 years. So both of those things, wanted to make sure those connections are made. And so with that, we have a very detailed presentation, a lot of detail about our operations and our different lines of business. And our chief operation officer is going to give beginning and frame the discussion, and then the officers of each line of business will talk specifically about the areas they're responsible for. So with that, Brent Goodman will begin the presentation.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you. As General Manager noted, is what we're doing today is presenting specifically on our operational and operations and maintenance budgets, as well as our capital budget specific to those operational areas. I'll go over just the outline and go through the where we're at in that budgeting process. Then I'll talk about the operational areas in summary, and then talk about how those operational budgets align with our city goals as well as our GRU mission. And then we'll have each one of our officers get up and talk about specifically about each one of their lines of business. So we've got Dino DeLeo talk about energy supply. We'll have Tony Carroll come up and talk about energy delivery as well as gas. And then we'll have Debbie Doherty talk about our water wastewater systems. And then Lewis Walton will come in and talk about telecommunications. Just kind of reminding us where we're at in that budget process. So as General Manager said, we've started back in February, and this is one next step in that process. So we're here on the 24th to talk about our operational budgets, both operation and maintenance as well as capital, hopefully provide a higher level of detail of what goes into our business that then gets fed into our a larger financial model. We provide these costs that we're going to present today into our budget, finance, and accounting folks, and they put into an overall budget package, and that will come back on August 9th. When we originally conceived of the budget calendar, we were thinking we were going to provide this information in 2 meetings, one for just specifically operation maintenance and one for capital. We felt like that those were pretty hard to present separately within the operational areas. So what we're hoping to do is provide a pretty thorough presentation from each officer, talk about operations and maintenance as well as capital. And unless warranted by the discussion today, is we weren't planning on coming back on the 31st to present any additional information. So one of the things that's really important, kind of sets the foundation of our operational areas and how they align with meeting the city commission goals. It's really important to show these goals as well as how they translate into our operational areas. So I'm going to go through that a little bit. So for Equitable Community, our operational folks think in terms of providing cost-effective services. In terms of providing sustainable community, it's really increasing efficiency, investing in those things that are increase our efficiencies. To have a great place to live and work, it's the pride we take in putting out a reliable service. Resilient local economy is, you'll hear about this in each one of the officer presentations, but how do we minimize our life cycle cost, or another way of saying that is maximizing the life we get out of an asset. When we buy something, we want to use it for a long time. So that's how we provide a resilient economy. And then we certainly can't have best-in-class neighborhood services without protecting public health and safety and investing in our employees. So the city's goals fit, hand in glove with GRU's mission. We have over 600 employees that do amazing things every single day, but they're really grounded and dedicated to providing those safe, reliable, competitively priced services in an environmentally responsible manner to the community. In the operational areas, I like to say we don't think in terms of a 40-hour week. We think of how are we going to cover the 160 hours in each week of every month of every year. So that's in our budgets and our investments reflect that continual coverage. So what we're going to present today are 2 things. They're intimately tied together. There are operation and maintenance, and then our capital. And so to kind of put that into, or use an analogy for your car, to kind of distinguish the difference between the two as it relates to our utility as well, is operation and maintenance. That's the gas you put in the car. That's the consumables. Those are the oil changes, the things that keep it operating and maintaining that car going down the road. From a capital perspective, it's actually the automobile itself. It's that capital investment. And then over time, as you need that car to last longer, there may be things that you need to repair. So a transmission, a radiator, an alternator. So those are the things that we do in our systems as well. So on the operation and maintenance side, those budgets are driven by our near-term demands. They incorporate our labor, our non-labor cost to maintain our facilities. So what's important here is every year in early December, our operational areas start looking at and forecasting what those costs would be. And we use a zero-based approach. So even though we compare from year to year, each year is significantly different. And so we plan and budget for those activities and those priorities we have for a specific year. And you'll hear that with our energy supply folks with regard to, this year we have more outages than last year. The other thing that's a challenge with our developing these budgets is oftentimes we're trying to project costs that we're going to incur as far as 22 months in advance of the budgets. So you can see some of that as you'll hear some of the challenges with that with regard to projecting chemical costs into the future. So that's our operation and maintenance business. And then on the capital side is driven by long-term planning, prioritization. It's not uncommon to see projects in the capital part of our budget to span multiple years, take a lot of effort to go through are expansive systems. So we have roughly $3 billion of assets out there. And so majority of our work is that programmatic renewal of our infrastructure. And so you'll hear that on our, both in energy delivery as well as our water wastewater group, is, you know, these large programmatic changes. As you continue to implement those, you want to stay on schedule. You don't want to get behind, so that you can continue to maintain an extensive amount of assets in the system. Those capital budgets, as I mentioned, are driven by those the long-term need to extend the life of our infrastructure. Now, there are other times where you start to see spikes in the system. Those are typically driven by either expansion or need for capacity. And in this budget, we do start to see some of those drivers, specifically with our Main Street water reclamation facility. That's a part of the system that we're actually trying to achieve capacity increases. The other thing that's a reality of capital spend is, even though we have long-term structured plans and priorities, things don't always work out the way we anticipate. So as things either fail or we see things with our diagnostics that we need to accelerate certain projects, our capital budgets are adaptive to those short-term realities. So now I'm going to go to just describing and kind of summarize our O&M part of the budget, and then I'll go into the capital. Before that, I'll spend some time with regard to, you know, talking about our operational areas of responsibility. So they include energy supply, so generating the electricity, energy delivery, taking that energy and electricity to our customers, and then we provide, you know, water and wastewater services, and we provide natural gas as well as telecommunications. So those are what is encompassed within our operational areas. What all our officers will be talking in terms of is what we call our controllable costs. And so what does that mean? It's the way we like to think about it is it's the costs that are within our direct control. So as we're comparing budget to actuals going forward into the year, these are the costs that then we are, again, directly responsible for. What these costs are, how they fit into the overall budget process, we take those controllable costs and then send those to budget, finance, and accounting, and they incorporate those into the larger GRU budget. And so that includes putting on overheads or corporate expenses. Just to, you know, elaborate on the labor, non-labor. So labor's self-explanatory. On the non-labor, again, in our O&M budgets, those are the chemicals, contract services, electricity, parts and materials. Just to give a breakdown of kind of percentages within our budgets, labor is about 56% of our O&M cost, and the remainder, the 44%, excuse me, is in our non-labor. With regard to the things that influence both our operation and maintenance as well as our capital budgets, I think you've probably heard these out in the news. Certainly since the global pandemic, these things have become realities. Supply chain issues, you know, with things that used to take days and weeks take months and years sometimes. So keeping on schedule with those preventative programs and those programmatic investments has become a challenge, and it does drive budget. Inflationary pressures, both in terms of those long-term programmatic projects. In order to stay on schedule with those, oftentimes you're, as the price of that material goes up, those kind of just pass along in your budgeting process. The other thing you'll see, inflationary pressures in the water system specifically, is where chemicals that we use for certain parts of the treatment process have, in some cases, quadrupled over time. And then one thing that will always be with us is that will always drive our budget is just aging infrastructure. Again, those $3 billion of assets require continual maintenance and upkeep to make sure that we can provide reliable service. Another major driver that we've seen both internally as well as externally is just the skilled labor shortage, both in terms of our vacancy rates and getting people in there to do the work we need them to do as employees, as well as our vendors and our contractors are also dealing with that same shortage of skilled labor. So here's the rolled up operation and maintenance budget for our operational areas. And I'll hit these kind of at a high level. And then each one of our officers will kind of unroll those and talk specifically about their areas. But just to kind of hit some of the highlights, and you'll hear this again, is just I'll work through each one of those systems and talk about some of the drivers. So energy supply, again, 1 year is not like the next year. This year, we're going to have more outages than in previous years, and that drives both the O&M as well as capital spend. In energy delivery, I think what you'll see is the price of doing business with some of our contractors has gone up. In addition, one of the things that is happening is we implement our advanced meter infrastructure project. Some of that project is turning from capital into long-term O&M. So you'll see some drivers and costs going up, as well as cost savings in other parts of the system where we're achieving efficiencies with the implementation of that project. On the water side, the highlight there is chemical and non-labor costs. Wastewater, similar story, other than it's not as acute as the water system. Gas has remained relatively flat. And then GRUCOM, the FY24 budget shows that the reduction in expenses that are associated with the sale of the TRS system. A couple things to note. Again, these are those controllable costs that we put into the overall budget model that will be presented back on August 9th. And I want to reiterate something the general manager said. These fit into that debt reduction plan that we've been presenting over the past several months. Again, I think it's important to tie back our investments in our O&M towards those city goals, and just to highlight where we make those investments in each one of these 5 categories is, continuing to push technology into our business makes us more cost effective. So whether it's the AMI project I mentioned, or we're putting GPS locators on vehicles to help us manage our fleet resources better, or it's investing in software technology called CityWorks to help us track and manage our assets to make better justification for where we spend our money in the future. That helps us provide the investments in that, help us provide cost-effective services. Whether on the efficiency standpoint, each one of our systems, there are a lot of continual process monitoring, whether it's generating electricity or providing water, or it's monitoring our transmission distribution system. That real-time monitoring is critical to providing optimization of our processes as well as responding in emergencies, and so that helps us become more efficient. On the reliability side, one of the things, all our business units are driven and highly regulated, so investing in environmental monitoring and compliance, customer calls, the service to the community, field services. When something breaks, correcting that, fixing it is really important, as well as our emergency response as we get into hurricane season. The other part where we invest in is that minimization of life cycle costs. When we get an asset, when we buy something, we want to make it last as long as possible. So we can only do that through investing into the preventative and predictive maintenance programs. And then the other part where we invest significantly is to protect public health and safety, is just our safety and training programs are really critical to carrying out our O&M activities. So that's the O&M side of the business, and now I'll go through the capital projections for FY24, and just hit these at a highlight and keep coming back to some of the things I've already said with the main drivers. Again, in energy supply, you see that we have more outages. That's driving the costs. In energy delivery, what we're seeing there is a long-term programmatic project that we need to keep going with. The parts and the pieces of that project are getting more expensive as we implement it. The other thing that's driving energy delivery is a regulatory project where we need to make an investment. We have a system control. We also need a backup control center, so we need to make some investments in that. On the water side, we typically spend on the order of $15 million a year. We're kind of in that band right now as projects are being implemented. New projects are coming on. On the wastewater side, this is where you're starting to see that signal of capacity increase. We're starting to get to a place where we're going to make turn dirt on the Main Street water reclamation facility. Gas is relatively stable, but driven by both the renewal of existing infrastructure as well as providing gas into some of the expansion or new phases of some subdivisions. GNV-SPAN, again, similar to the O&M budget, you're seeing a decrease in the capital spend. The other thing that while we don't have an individual presentation or somebody coming up to talk about it, we do spend and invest money into our corporate side. And what's reflected here are two major projects. One of those projects is our customer information system that's implemented. So it's rolling off in FY24. But our AMI project, our advanced metering infrastructure project, continues in FY24. So that's the the capital budget at a high level. Again, our operational officer will come up and talk about their specific projects in more detail. One of the things I think is important to note on these projects is what you'll see in the more detailed presentations is many of these projects are associated with grants. And we don't show the grant reimbursement dollars in here. We just show the total project cost, and then the grants they'll be reimbursed either incorporated at a later date. But we just want to show what we're, again, responsible charge of in terms of what the total project costs are. So that's the capital budget in summary. And just like the O&M budget, I think it's important to tie back our investments that we make into each one of these systems and how they influence meeting the city's goals. And these are just examples of that. So it's whether it's GNV-SPAN making upgrades to our electronics to improve its performance and provide cost-effective services, or it's energy supply implementing equipment to make us more efficient and save us money on the operations side or the production side of energy, or it's the energy delivery going through our transmission and distribution system and proactively replacing the electrical gear that we have in the system to provide that reliable service. Or it's the wastewater and gas system going out there and doing proactive replacements to minimize our lifecycle costs and maximize our assets, or protecting public health with we have cast iron, ductile iron lines that we don't want to fail, and so we want to replace those to avoid any potential public exposure to wastewater. So those are just some examples of where our investments in the capital infrastructure tie back to one, accomplishing Jerry's mission, but overarching accomplishing the city's goals. So that's my part of the presentation. The one thing I was going to note at the beginning, but I forgot to, given the number of speakers, it's probably best to do Q&A with each speaker while they're up here talking about their system.
Right. Agreed. But I don't see any lights right now, but this is a great opportunity to do an intermittent question. Now, and for those watching at home and for those of us here in the room, we have had individually, I believe, at least the opportunity to work with this presentation through the general manager and yourself already. So a lot of questions have already been worked through. But if anybody has any more, these are the times to do so. We're not seeing any lights here, so
Okay.
let's.
And I'll be back for the discussion part as well.
You're the MC, yes.
All right, very good. That's right. All right, so with that, I'd like to introduce Dino DeLeo. He's our energy supply officer, and he'll talk about his business.
Welcome, Mr. DeLeo. Good to see you.
Mayor, Commissioners, David O'Leary, Energy Supply Officer. Thank you. I'm here to talk big picture about the Energy Supply fiscal year 24 budget proposed. I'll be covering the O&M and capital. Pretty much what, as the Chief Operating Officer said, the first area we're going to start with is the area of responsibility for energy supply. So energy supply is responsible for the safe, reliable operation of 10 generating units at 4 different stations across the city. So we have the Deerhaven Generating Station, Dairy Renewable, Kelly Generating Station, and we have 2 power plants at the South Energy Center, which is located on the Shands campus. Additionally, are responsible for all the planned, predictive, preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance of all those 10 generating units and the associated infrastructure that supports those 10 generating units. In fiscal year 24, it's been mentioned a number of times. Typically, and I'll talk more about this in later slides, but I'll just prelude it now, is typically we have between 2 to 3 major outages in a year. In fiscal year 24, we're going to have 4 major outages, and I'll explain the driver of that in a minute or two. The outages drive the cost. The outages are that period of time where we take the unit down and we do major maintenance. And those outages are designed to go from outage to outage with no major failure. So you set the periodicity of those outages in such a way that you can minimize your costs, because an outage costs money, but at the same token, you don't take too much risk that you can have a major failure in between those outages. In the case of our units, our major steam units, for Dairy Renewable, that's an annual basis. So the biomass plant requires an annual outage in order for us to do that. For Deerhaven 2 and Kelly Generating Station, so Deerhaven 2 and Kelly, it's 18 months. For Deerhaven 1, that is 2 years. Unfortunately, in fiscal year 24, we are going to have another Deerhaven 1 outage, even though we had one last year. I'll explain why in a minute. But it's the major driver of our cost of our outages. Our cost of our O&M and capital is those outages. So this is by the profit center. Our O&M budget, as the Chief Operating Officer showed earlier. We have about a $1.6 million increase over what we had in 23. You can't compare 23 to 24. 23 had 2 outages in it, and 24 has 4 outages in it. So part of that 1.6 million increase is driven by the inflationary pressures, the supply chain issues, but more importantly, driven by the outages themselves. Our outage season basically begins on October 1st and goes all the way through the May 15th, sometimes into June and July, but we call it the shoulder months we do those outages. We'll be in outages during that entire period of time, and that's the major driver of that cost. For establishing the energy supply budget as the chief operator, we start out with a zero-based approach every year. So at $0, we start to layer what we need each year to cover that particular year. So the budget is established by supporting what is needed for day-to-day operations of the plant. This is not just the personnel side of it, it is the equipment side, it's the chemicals, it's the lubricants, it's all the material and services we need to sustain the operation of the plant. Additionally, all that maintenance, which is the planned and the predictive and preventive and corrective maintenance needed to support the units throughout the year. And that's all layered in basically on the forecast. We don't defer maintenance. We don't defer maintenance in any way, and that's the reason we have those outage cycles. So when you think about those outage cycles, DHR at a 1-year interval, Deerhaven 2 and Kelly at 18 months, and Deerhaven 1 at 2 years, you stagger those in such a way to kind of levelize your budget as much as possible. That's just kind of how they fall out on the calendar. And they would have fell out that way here in 24, just like they did before. We'd have 3 outages like we had in 23 and 22. However, may recall that Deerhaven 1 was scheduled to retire in December of 22, last December, after 50 years of operation. So back in 21, we were asked to perform an evaluation of Deerhaven 1 to see what it would take to extend the life. It's called a lifetime assessment. You look at the critical components like the turbine, the generator, the steam path components. We started that process in 21, developed the scope of work and the plan in 21 and 22, and then we executed that outage in 23. So last fall, we did that outage for Deerhaven 1, looked at all the turbines, all the components, did all the lifetime assessment, and as reported to you previously, we were able to get a recommendation that we could support 5 additional years of operation of Deerhaven 1. But I want to be clear, it's on the drop. Okay, it's got 5 years left. That's what we're extending it for. But during that outage, because everything was being run, as you know, we deferred things. We were going to run it to end of life. We don't want to leave a lot of life in that component if it's going away in December of 22. So there are findings that were discovered during that outage. It's not minimal. It's about $3 million worth of finding between the O&M and capital. And you cannot go a 2-year periodicity like you normally would for Deerhaven 1 to do that. So we're going to have to do another Deerhaven 1 outage in 24, which brings Deerhaven 1 into our mix for the 4 outages. Because what you want to do is you want to maximize the benefit of what you do to ensure reliability through 2027. You couldn't wait till 25 to do Deerhaven 1 because we likely would have a failure in between. Because again, we were running near the end of life on those components. So that's the outage, that's kind of the driver. And I talked a little bit about the lifetime assessment. I'll get a little more breakdown of the lifetime assessment cost in a later slide. So that's the O&M component, and now we talk about the capital. So again, here's the capital budget, just like the chief operating officer presented. This shows just the energy supply portion. So it's about $4.2 million in 24, then in 23. 2.8 million of that is associated with the Deerhaven 1 lifetime assessment. Those are capital projects that have to be done on Deerhaven 1 following that outage. And the other is associated with basically inflationary pressures that we are seeing and our supply chain issues. Here I want to highlight some of the key items, and I've mentioned this lifetime assessment so many times already in the presentation, but I want to give you kind of a visual. The first, for the lifetime, these are the, I talked to you, I'm going to give you the highlight. There's about 2.5 million in capital, about 300,000 in O&M. But the major items in the capital are the air heater baskets. So the air heaters are at the inlet to the turbine. They set the thermal efficiency of the turbine. They were installed in 2005. They were already near the end of life as we did our last outage on Deerhaven 1, but we deferred doing the baskets because we were going to retire in 22. But we can't continue to operate. If you look in the far right-hand corner, that shows you the inlet to the air heater baskets. You should be able to see through those baskets. You can see the fouling that's in there. You can see the warping of the plates. So we're not going to replace all the air heaters. We're going to replace what we need to get us reliably through 2027. And it's about $600,000 is our anticipated cost. For the generator on Deerhaven 1, there are 2 step-up transformers. Both those transformers are 50 years old, just like the unit was. So for us to extend those transformers beyond that 50 years, there's a scope of work we had to develop. We worked with our partners in energy delivery to develop that scope of work for both those step-up transformers. Part of that is radiators, part of those is insulators and bushings, part of that is internal inspections in transformers. But our estimate is about $1.25 million to upgrade those transformers to get us through 2027 reliably. The next is the emission stack, which is the stack that where our emission or discharge of the emission system, combustion system goes through. Normally, I would be in front of you today asking for money to take the stack down. But because we're extending the life, we're not doing that. We already had work that we deferred. There are structural issues, there are electrical issues, there are emission issues that have to be addressed for the stack, and it's about $250,000 to get the stack to get through 2027. The last is all of our control systems require a DC backup, a direct current backup. So we have a battery associated with the plant. These are station batteries. You see it in the far left-hand corner. That station battery is rated by its capacity. Once it's discharged, what capacity is left of the unit. And we do that test every year. And 80% is the low end. You can't go beyond that. That's a NERC requirement. We are in the mid-80s, but we won't make it 2 years on that station battery where we'll fall below the NERC requirements. So we have to replace that station battery that we were running to end of life, but now we'll have to replace that station battery. That's a little over $100,000 to replace that battery. The next is for capital projects is we have Deerhaven 2 outage. During Deerhaven 2 outage, we have insulation that surrounds the boiler. It's there for the thermal efficiency of the boiler. It's also there to protect personnel. We have deterioration of that insulation over time. So a project for about $575,000 to replace insulation, specifically up at the top end of the boiler in the penthouse region where we have a lot of heat radiated and a lot of settling of the insulation. That has to be replaced not only for the efficiency of the boiler, but safety of personnel. For all of our solid fuel plants, i.e. Deerhaven 2, which burns coal, it can burn coal, and the biomass plant that burns wood, we have baghouses because in the actual emissions, we have particulate matter that has to be removed from our emission system. We don't discharge particulate matter to the atmosphere. We capture it in bags, and then we capture it and we dispose of that properly. Those bag houses are pretty extensive. In Deerhaven, there are 10 compartments. Each compartment has 1,000 bags. So for this outage, we're going to do 5 of those compartments, 5,000 bags. It's based on the condition of the bags last outage, so we know what bags we have to replace, and that's estimated about $1 million to replace those 5. And then the follow-on Deerhaven 2 outage, we'll do the other 5 compartments, assuming the assessment comes back satisfactory. The voltage regulator for Deerhaven 2 has been in operation since the original. It is not having the response time. We do not have the same control support that we need for that. So there's an upgrade that needs to be done for that voltage regulator on the generator for about $250,000 to sustain it for continued operation. For Deerhaven combustion turbine 1 and 2, these are the small combustion turbines. These are frame 5s, about 17 to 19 megawatts each. They're really important to us. They are peakers, but they're both scheduled to retire in 26. So we have our normal work that we do on them each year. But as part of the integrated resource plan process, IRP process, we have been asked that what would it take if we asked you to try to extend the life of combustion turbine 1 and 2? So we have built a scope of work in 24 and 25 where we're going to assess the electrical components of those combustion turbines and have a report that if the IRP comes back and says we want you to consider extending them, we're going to have a cost and a scope of work that would need to be done in order to do that. Again, they will be at 50 years of operation in 2026. So you're talking about extending a combustion turbine beyond 50 years. And the next is for Deerhaven combustion turbine number 3. That's our unit, much like combustion turbine 4 over at Kelly, but it's a simple cycle unit. The actual controls, it was installed in 1995. They're at end of life. We have to do an upgrade to the control system to continue to operate combustion turbine 3. And that's estimated about $275,000 for that controls upgrade. We have a project that's a joint project between Deerhaven and Dairy Renewable. We're happy to report that we actually got a grant for this from the Suwannee River Water District, about $750,000. It is the picture you see to the right. We're able to share the water usage and the pond usage between Deerhaven and Dairy Renewable. These have been separate facilities and managed as separate facilities under a zero discharge concept. We actually able to combine those. It's good for our customers, it's good for our plants, it reduces the wear and tear on our components, and it better utilizes the facilities. And we're happy to report when we get that project done, it'll all be encompassed under the grant. I've mentioned the combustion turbines a bunch of times. Think of the combustion turbines, because they cover peak, as jet engines. Jet engines, they have to run, they have to start fast, and they have to load fast. It means they see a lot more wear and tear than our steam units. They require a lot more nurturing. You see the various components in the pictures below. So the first for CT4, combustion turbine 4 correction, at Kelly, it put in service in 2001. The exciter is the device that gives you the electromagnetic force in the rotor. It is the oomph that pushes the electricity out of the system. That exciter is at end of life, and we have to replace that. It's at 22 years of operation. Our estimated cost to do that is $300,000. The follow-on item is the big ticket item. So these combustion turbine components were pulled out of CT3, combustion turbine 3 at Kelly, all those components at the bottom. We have to have those looked at, refurbished, resurfaced, replaced, make them ready for the next major inspection. So combustion turbine 3 and 4 are identical. So we take the components, we just did the major inspection on combustion turbine 3, we have to spend money in 24, about $1.75 million, to assess those components, to replace some of those components if they are beyond their useful life, so that we can have those components ready for the next major inspection of combustion turbine 4 in 2025. So we spend this money in 24 to make it ready for 25. For Unit 8, we recall in 21 we replaced the turbine and generator, put a brand new turbine and generator, but all the infrastructure at Kelly is still its original structure, 1962, commissioned operation 1964. So like we did at Deerhaven 1 and Deerhaven 2, our circuit water lines are the lines that provide the water to the cooling towers. The cooling towers are the heat sink to the plant. These are large pipes with large flow. They see a lot of erosion, they see a lot of corrosion. We maintain them, we do NDE readings, we know what the wall thickness is. But Kelly, Unit 8 piping, originally installed in 1962, is falling below that minimum wall thickness. So before it fails, we're going to replace those circuit water lines, exactly what we did at Deerhaven 1 and Deerhaven 2, which, by the way, got to leaking before we actually replaced them. We're going to try to do Kelly before we get to that point. DHR. So the biomass plant. If you recall, we bought out of the power purchase agreement in 2017, which gave us ownership of that plant. The actual turbine building for that particular plant is a building that doesn't have any crane or lifting mechanisms in it. All of our turbine decks have cranes and lifting mechanisms because we're talking about lifting turbine casings in the label of tons a compartment. So to work on the actual Deerhaven renewable, we actually have to physically remove the roof. So you see the first two pictures there, the inside of the roof area and the external part of the roof. You have to physically remove the roof to get access to the turbine because the crane has to get above and pull components out. That, by the way, is very costly, it's extensive amount of work, and it exposes everything inside that compartment to the elements once the roof is removed. So we have a project where we've done before, we've modified the roof till we have parts of the roof that can be removed that will give us access to those turbines, but easily covered by a tarp, not removing the entire roof, easier to remove and easier access. It's convenient because we're at the 10-year point of commercial operation, which will be this December for Deerhaven Renewable, where the major inspection of that turbine will take place in 25. So it'd be roof modification. DHR, a solid fuel plant, has baghouse to remove that particulate matter. We anticipate that we're going to do 4 compartments. It's about $475,000 to remove those and replace those bags. Boiler optimization. So the chief operating officer mentioned, most of our fans run on a heavy motor, so they run full speed, and we control flow by dampers. So you basically got a fan running, and you're controlling it by controlling flow through it. A lot of electricity used. Variable frequency drives allow you to run the motor, and you vary the speed of the motor. So you're controlling the flow by the motor. Significantly smaller motors, significantly less electricity being used because you're not stifling it by controlling the output. We have a variable frequency project for the induction fan, which is the induction fan to the boiler, and primary air fans to the boiler. Both those VFD projects, and these are multi-year, 24 and 25, are going to reduce the size of those motors, reduce our load to around $300,000 of savings each year. So even though it's a capital investment, we'll have a reduction in our O&M true electrical cost about $300,000 a year, let alone the wear and tear on the fans. It's a lot of wear and tear on the fan. When you run it at full speed, you're using a damper to control flow. Whereas if you could use a motor to do it, we reduce the wear and tear on those components as well. So it's a cost savings for us. And the boiler controls upgrade. 10 years of operation, we have a Siemens control system, Valmat boiler. We have had systemic problems with that control system, and our support is in Sweden. It's overseas. So we have a controls upgrade that we want to do to give us more local support so we can obviously service it and control it within the United States and not have to do it by phone or by connecting through the internet. With cybersecurity issues, that's a concern for us. So our controls engineers put up the project to give us a controls upgrade to give us more reliability out of Deerhaven Renewable and not rely on that control platform we have now. And on the bottom, the South Energy Center, phase 1 was done in 2009. There were GE relays associated with all the controls aspects. They are at end of life. They're no longer serviced. They're no longer maintained by General Electric. So we are buying a new set of upgraded relays that have to be installed over time to make the South Energy Center reliable. We estimate that cost about $312,000. The hospital has requested a proposal to change the service to the cancer hospital to hot water. So originally in 2009, when we did phase 1 of the South Energy Center, we provided steam to the cancer hospital. They used the steam themselves to make hot water. In 2017, when we did phase 2 of the South Energy Center, we provided to the cardiovascular and neuromedicine, we provide them hot water. We do not provide them steam. We provide them hot water directly from the South Energy Center. That's exactly what the hospital would like us to start providing to the cancer hospital. So we're working a proposal to change what we provide them, which would be steam, into just hot water. Interesting enough, in 2017, when we did the phase 2, we wrote that contract in such a way that when we transition to hot water for the cancer hospital, we don't have to change the contract, or we don't have to write a new contract. We just have to amend the current contract. So it was written that way under the pretense that we would probably eventually get. The hospital no longer needs steam in the hospital. What they need is hot water. They figured out their steam services through other methods. And that is it. Subject to any questions for energy supply.
We do have one question, Commissioner Willetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go the most recent that we've heard on the SEC, the change to hot water. Does that then we'll only be supplying hot water?
Oh.
We won't be providing any steam at that point from SEC to the hospitals?
Mayor, Commissioner, great question. I should have more clarified this. So we provide all thermal services, obviously chill water to the hospital, med gas services to the hospital. This will just change our heat source from steam, where we use the steam and the condensate comes back to us, thus making the hot water and sending them hot water, turn the water, heat it back up and send it back to them. So we're changing their method of the way they use it for their heating purposes and their hot water usage.
Will it simplify some of the operations at SEC? We won't be providing steam anymore?
So it would simplify some of the operations. I mean, we're still always going to need steam because we have a steam chiller and we have an auxiliary boiler. So we have components with the SEC that need steam, but it will reduce the intake on that, and it will standardize. It will make the cancer hospital look a lot like the cardiovascular medicine. So there's some savings there, not only in technology but in shared services as well. So it will help that.
That's kind of what I would get into and asking about. And then this is about kind of Deer Haven, but perhaps other facilities. How do these capital project costs compare to either previous estimates of running facilities or understandings or any of these? Are we learning things in the recent assessments that we wish we would have known before we made certain other decisions? Or any of these kind of new, or most of these in line with things you expect over time? I mean, some of them are very clear. You say 10 years this, 10 years that, or whatever. But I'm trying to get a sense of it, like the Deer Haven having to remove part of a roof because we don't have, that kind of the mechanical ability we would prefer, like in some of our other plants. So I'm just trying to grasp how some of these fit in with our previous understandings of our energy supply plants.
So, Mayor, Commissioner, it's a great question. I'll say that when you say previous here, so when we start looking at the Deer Haven renewable, we're anticipating what our outages are going to look like. We're looking at those costs. Part of those costs is that removal, roof installation, and exposed to the environment that would happen during time. That's what spurred us into that discussion, because there's nothing inside the housing, inside the actual building. You can see with a roof there that actually allows you to lift major components within the system. So that was something that we observed and we want to get proactively. So if you're asking, are we learning as we go? Yeah, the answer is yes, but at the same token, and again, I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's a true statement, our infrastructure is old. Okay, so there's not a lot to base it on. I can't go to FP&L, I can't go to Duke and compare what they're doing because they don't have any units over 35 years old. We have 4 of them that are over 35 years old. So we have learned year to year, and what we've really learned is how to stretch that outage interval to go between outages, because we used to do annual outages on all of them, and we've extended that. That reduced our cost greatly without risking the unit integrity. And we experiment with that all the time. We use empirical data we have, our forced outage rate we have each year to see if that periodicity still works. So I will say that every year we look at it, we look at what we're doing, and are there ways for us to improve it? And we have definitely improved that. Like I said, only 7 years ago, we did annual outages. So just literally, if you go from annual to 18 months, you defer an entire outage. If you defer an entire Deer Haven 2 outage, that's $2.3 million. The minute you open Deer Haven 2, it's $2.3 million. That's the balance of plant work there. So we have done that, but I do want to go back to, and part of the integrated resource plan is that the aging infrastructure is what we maintain. I'm going to use the analogy that nobody wants to hear, but if I have to maintain my high school car or I have to brand new Toyota Prius, it's a lot more expensive to maintain my high school car than that Toyota Prius. Those Toyota Prius parts are readily available, easily accessible, for that Chevy Nova that I had in high school, I got to go find that part somewhere in a junkyard somewhere. I'm not saying we're that where, but we are 50 years old. That's where Deerhaven 1 is. It makes it more difficult to maintain.
Okay, and then I had.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. Nothing sounds like it's stuck out as something that we completely were caught off guard or suddenly like, oh, we never should have bought Deerhaven Renewable because look, we had to. These are things that we know about our plants. That's what I'm asking. Is any of this dramatically different than our understandings of our plants 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago? Obviously not when we built them 50 years ago, but.
Mayor, Commissioner, another great question. Let me go back on the outages for a second, just to clarify. The outage we will do this year will determine the scope of work for the next outage. So we're looking at things, the outage that we're doing in '24 was the work we did in '22. We looked at the unit, and we developed that scope of work on what the outage told us. So we're using each outage. Sometimes you have discovery work that you have to address right there and then. You can't continue the operation. Sometimes you're able to plan that work, which is less expensive and easier to coordinate. But we do that through the sequence of all of our outages. Each outage has an inspection phase that you're hoping to learn, so you develop the scope of work for the next outage. And of course, during that, you may have something that goes bad in between that you have to address. But hopefully 80% of the scope is determined by the previous outage.
All right. And then just one last question is, because we're extended the life of Deerhaven 1, how do some of those decisions on what is O&M versus capital get made? Because I'm still a little confused. On a 5-year-old, or a expected 5-year, is it capital, is it O&M? Just how do those decisions get made?
So believe it or not, in the budget and finance world, there are FERC codes that determine what the service life of the component determines whether it can be capitalized or not capitalized. Now, I wasn't going to cover this, but I will for Deerhaven 1. It's in a unique situation because I told you it's on the drop. Okay, I don't know if you guys heard that a couple of times, but you're going to hear it. It's on the drop. It's not going to be around past 2027. So I don't get to amortize those capital costs over 30 years. I get to amortize those costs through 2027. So we have to work with DFA to recover that cost during that period of time. But the FERC code, back to your original word, determines whether it can be capitalized or not. And we stay within that code so that obviously, there's benefits to our customers to capitalizing things, but there's also disadvantages to capitalize something that you could just pay for in 1 year and be done with it. So we stay within the FERC codes.
Great.
Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's the only light. So.
Okay, all right, thank you.
How's that Chevy Nova doing, by the way?
What's that?
You still have the Chevy Nova in the garage?
I do not have my first car. I wish I had my second car.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'd like to introduce Tony Carroll. He's our officer of our energy delivery. He's also, he's going to talk about the electric side as well as come back up and also provide a presentation on our gas system.
Very good. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners. Okay, let's talk about energy delivery and what we do in energy delivery. For the most part, we take the power that's generated by energy supply and we transmit that power over transmission lines to substations. And then we run that power through a substation transformer, which steps the voltage down from, say, 138,000 volts down to 12,000 volts. And then at the substation, we have distribution feeders, and we distribute that power out to all the neighborhoods and businesses throughout the city. And then at each service location, at a customer's house or a business, we'll have another smaller transformer, which will step that voltage down from 12,000 volts down to 120 volts, 240 volts that the customers can utilize in their business and or their home. All right, so what makes up energy delivery is we've got a substation and relay group, we've got an electric T&D group, we've got a system control, and we've also got energy measurement and field operations. And within all of those, we've got engineers who design and also do engineering work and maintenance work. Okay, some of the major drivers for our O&M budget for fiscal year '24 as the Chief Operating Officer pointed out, we've got an increase in our contract tree trimming costs, our vegetation management contract. And that's $689,000. And also, as the Chief Operating Officer mentioned, our AMI project, as we implement the AMI and we install more and more AMI meters, costs are transferred from the project itself into our operating cost. And at year to date, just this year, we've got over 5,000 AMI meters deployed. And so as we bring those AMI meters online, then we start incurring those operating costs instead of the costs going to the project itself. For contract services, we have a net increase in system control related to cybersecurity, and that's $177,000. And we also had a decrease in cost. In this past year, we eliminated 2 positions. One was a senior manager position, and one was a contract engineer position, and that produced a savings of over $300,000. And we've also seen a decrease in our meter measurement and operations group of about $316,000. And again, that's due to the AMI implementation, whereas where we would normally send technicians out to replace defective meters, those meters are being replaced on the AMI project with new AMI meters. And so we're avoiding that O&M cost because it's hitting that capital project. Okay, that's the overall O&M budget table for energy delivery. As you can see, there's a lot of cost centers, and but if you look at the bottom line, the total, you see a net increase of about $1 million, and with all the inflation costs, that's about 3%. So we're happy with the reductions that we've made, and that we don't have any more cost increases over $1 million. All right, next we'll talk about the capital budget. And after this slide, I'll talk about some individual drivers and notable projects that we'll be doing in fiscal year 24. But some of the big ticket items you see on the table, the first one that stands out is electric engineering. And you may think $3 million, what kind of engineers are you guys hiring over there? Well, it's not, those aren't the costs for engineers. Engineering, we are responsible for generating the capital budget for the electric T&D, our line crews. And so within the engineering group lies the budget for the projects, the major projects that I'll talk about in a few minutes. The next big ticket item you'll notice is substation operations. We're replacing several transformers as part of our capital plan over the next few years. 2 of those transformers will be replaced in 2024. I'll talk about that project in more detail later. The next big ticket item is going to be system control operations. In system control, we have an operating system, and it's called an energy management system, and also an outage management system. I'll discuss that in more detail, but for the most part, the reason we're seeing an increase in system control in both tech support and also system control operations is because we're upgrading some of the computer hardware and also upgrading the software in that area. And it's a contract requirement from the company that we purchased the software from. And also embedded in that cost is the cost of our backup control center, as our Chief Operating Officer alluded to earlier. And I'll discuss those projects in more detail. Okay, now as I said earlier, all of this capital expense is part of our capital plan that we do to maintain our existing facilities. And many of our transformers and other facilities are 50+ years old. And so we're getting near the end life of those items, and so we either have to maintain them or replace them. And so at McMeekin Substation, we are replacing that substation transformer there, and the cost is $1.4 million. If you're not familiar with McMeekin Substation, that's on the east side of town on Northeast 15th Street. And it's a 44 MVA transformer, and we're going to be replacing that. We're doing the same thing at Mill Hopper Substation. It's another distribution transformer. It's Cost is $1.4 million. And then at Parker Substation, we have some improvements going on there. We're replacing our 138 kV and 238 kV breakers. These are all circuit breakers. They're very old. You see the pictures, I should have pointed that out first, I apologize. At the bottom left picture, that's a picture of substation transformer in the background. That is a distribution breaker, or no, that's actually a transformer breaker that is in the foreground towards us. That middle picture is a substation transformer on a crane that's being lifted into place on the rails so we can slide it into place under the buswork at the substation. And the picture on the far right that's a picture of an old 138 kV all circuit breaker. And those things are filled with oil, and the reason why it's critical to be replaced is that there have been instances where those circuit breakers, not on our system, but in other utilities, where they had fires that were started inside the substation because the circuit breakers couldn't interrupt the fault that had occurred internally. Okay. All right, the next project I'll talk about is a transformer or transmission line insulator replacement. Okay, the life cycle of a porcelain insulator ranges anywhere from 30 to 60 years, depending on the environment that it's exposed to and the weather. And in our particular case, most of our transmission lines are 51, 52 years old. And so these, as you can see in that middle picture, that's a picture of a porcelain strained insulator, where those are individual insulators that are held together by a steel pin. And over time, depending on the environment and the hot and the cold and corrosion takes over and causes that pin to fail. And if you wait long enough, you can end up with a transmission line on the ground. So that's why it's critical that we get these transmission line insulators replaced. And that total cost of that project is $6.3 million over 3 to 5 years. And so we estimate it to be a little over $1 million per year. Okay, another project that we have is the 62nd, Southwest 62nd connector. And this is actually a City Works project where they're using DOT funding to build a connector, be a new thoroughfare to reduce traffic in other areas of town. And so along that connector, Energy Delivery will be installing a new feeder from Sugarfoot Substation over to the North Butler Plaza and also Celebration Point. And in order to maintain existing services to houses and businesses in the area, we're going to be installing an underground feeder from one side of town, from Sugarfoot Substation all the way over to Celebration Point, and that's going to be require about 7,000 feet of 1 million MCM aluminum, 3 switch gears, and 9 junction cabinets. And also along that connector, this is also going to supply power for the pedestrian lights and also the traffic lights and the street lights along that corridor. Okay, we also have a project where North Florida is building a new hospital. And our cost for fiscal year 24 is going to be about $500,000. And as part of this serving the new hospital, of course, it being a hospital, the developer is requesting redundant service. So we're going to have a primary source and also an alternate source and an automatic transfer switch. So that if the primary source goes out, the power will automatically switch to the alternate source. Now, because that is over and above what GRU would provide any other customer, the developer will be paying for any excess costs, which we estimate between $400,000 and $500,000. So we'll, even though we have to budget for this cost, we will be reimbursed for the additional cost for the premium power, is what I like to refer to it as. Okay, last but not least, we'll talk about, again, system control and the projects we have going on there. Again, we're going to be enhancing and expanding our backup control center. And as part of that, we're also going to be installing a UPS, which is an uninterruptible power supply. Just think about that, that little box that you may or may not have under your desk, so that if the lights blink, you don't lose any unsaved information on your computer. That UPS helps you to ride through a power outage. And so in our case, we're required by federal regulations to have a backup power to ride through those situations where the system control might lose power itself. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes during major storms and other emergencies, we have lost power, and the UPS has done its job. Let's see, now the computer hardware I spoke of earlier, we're going to be upgrading some of our systems, and so the total cost is going to be $790,000. And also, we're going to be upgrading the OMS system, which is the computer system that runs our system control, how we operate our system, and also detect outages. So OMS stands for Outage Management System, and you'll also see OSI down there. That's another acronym. If you haven't noticed that GRU has about 1,000 or so acronyms that we use, and it's difficult for me to keep up with, so I'm sure it's not easy for you either. So OSI is actually the name of the company who makes the software that we use for our energy management system and our outage management system. And OSI stands for, I looked this up earlier and now I can't remember it. It's a company based in Aspen, Colorado, and it's Outage System International. Okay, so now we'll go to talk about, oh, that's it for me. So, I'm sure you have questions.
Commissioner Willets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Parker substation improvements, the breakers and switches are old, as you've described. Is this also in preparation for bringing on new supply in with the Origin Solar out there, or is this completely separate from that project?
That is separate. We do have that project planned, and it will cost about $700,000 for the interconnection for the feeders that will come from the solar plant itself, that the solar provider will be building and installing and owning and maintaining. We have to have a mechanism to connect that up to our step-up transformer to step it up to transmission level voltage.
Okay, I think that's what I remember, and so I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
We had talked about that previously when we finally approved that contract. And this is getting ready for a larger project in 25 and 26, correct?
That's correct. I should have mentioned that. I think it's noted there, but yes, in 25 and 26, we will be replacing the auto transformers at Parker Substation. And what an auto transformer does, it's at a transmission level voltage. So they're actually stepping the connection point that we have with Duke Energy, 230 kV, it steps it down to 138 kV, so we can tie the 230 kV system to our 138 kV system, and it makes the system more reliable.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's the only light I have, so
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I'd like to introduce Debbie Doherty. She's our officer, and she'll cover our water, wastewater systems.
Very good, thank you. As I like to tell people pretty regularly, we absolutely respect the electrical portion of the system, but let the water stop working and see how quickly civilization deteriorates. So
You won't hear outage in my presentation. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Debbie Doherty, Water Wastewater Officer. Let me get this thing in my hand. So I'll start with the water system first. The budgets presented today cover producing the water at Murphy and delivering it to our customers. So to highlight the areas of responsibility, we need to provide safe and reliable drinking water 24/7, 365. We do have Murphy and then 1,100 miles of water distribution main to maintain and services. The majority of the O&M expenses and water are mandated by regulatory requirements. We do have engineering helping us out with meeting our current and future safe drinking water standards. Our personnel are trained and licensed to operate the system. 80% of the staff in the water system are either licensed, well, they're all licensed by the state of Florida, whether they're an engineer or an operator or a water distribution operator. They all have maintained licenses. So that's a big part of our business. 67% of our non-labor expenses are driven purely by electricity and chemicals at Murphy. So I just wanted to point that out. The next slide is our budget, O&M budget overall. You'll see it's pretty evident, $11 million of the 17.5 on the table are all at Murphy. That is primarily where our O&M is expensed. We do have a large increase at Murphy this year. You'll see almost $2 million there, which I'll explain. A lot of that is tied to chemicals and electricity and contract services. The other budgets are pretty consistent with years in the past. Going forward, the drivers affecting our O&M budget, we have had significant price increases in our chemicals, so that has really impacted our water budget. Primarily chlorine is the biggest one. Back in 2021, we were paying between $400, $600 a ton for chlorine. We're now paying over $2,000 a ton for chlorine. So those prices have really skyrocketed on us, so that is the largest driver of that. Lime is costing us an extra $500,000, so that's the biggest drivers in the water budget. On the O&M side is those chemical increases. We do have some expenses on contract and professional services also. A lot of that is lime residual hauling, inspection services that we do at the water plant and in our system. We're also preparing for 2 new regulations that are coming in the water system. PFAS, y'all all hear about the forever chemical that they talk about in the media. That rule is coming down the pipe, so we are watching that regulation, and we're going to be starting to sample at Murphy and doing our studies. We feel pretty good about Murphy. We're a groundwater system. When y'all read about in the paper, most of those systems are surface water systems, so the likelihood that we have PFAS is pretty slim, but we're still staying abreast of that regulation coming. Lead and copper is also coming in 2024. That rule will be in place. We have to finish an inventory of the entire system, and it's not only looking at the public side of the water system, it's also looking at the private side, from the customer's meter to their house. So we have to have an inventory by October of 2024 of every water service in town and be able to designate the material of that water service on our side and the customer side by October of 2024. So we are spending money trying to do some of that investigation and looking at how to predict what those systems are so that we can be ready for that rule that comes in place next year. And that data will be available to customers on a web-based, through a portal. They'll be able to look at their address and see what materials they have. If it is lead, we have a responsibility to replace that in the future. So you'll see expenses in the coming years on that. So those are our main drivers on our O&M budget for water. For capital, we have a slight down. Like Brett mentioned earlier in his presentation, our budgets are anywhere from $15 to $16 million in the water system, so this is a pretty typical budget for us. Like Energy Delivery said, engineering does carry the majority of the capital projects, so that's why you see that profit center has high dollars. The reality is our projects are split about 50-50 between the plants and the piping system. So we're spending about $7.5 million at the plant and about $7.5 million in the water distribution system. It's almost 50-50. So highlighting some of the projects that are going on, all of these projects are just extending the life of the asset that we have. Many of y'all been to Murphy. Y'all know we have 15 well pumps, and then we have 6 large high service pumps. Any given year that you look in our budget, you are going to see one of those pumps being worked on or multiple of those pumps being worked on. So in this particular coming up year in 24, we had a failure at high service pump 6, which is one of our large high service pumps. It's actually driven by a diesel, so it's a critical pump for us. So we're in the process of rebuilding and replacing that pump right now. So that is a large project going on. Well 9 and 11 are getting some upgrades, and also in this coming year. The other project that's noted is our lime system improvements. Because of these chemical price increases, we're looking at ways to be more efficient with our chemical usage and looking at ways to use less chemical in the future. So that's the project that's mentioned there on the plant side. And for the piping side, most of our water distribution work is programmatic replacement and renewals. We're out replacing water services and replacing water mains, especially in neighborhoods where we have galvanized, steel mains. We're out replacing those water services. Most of that work is done by directional drill. I added a picture. We're trying to minimize the impact to the customers, but also minimize our costs in doing that work so that we don't have as much restoration. Most of this work is driven by water leaks, low pressure complaints. If there's a roadway project, we'll probably work alongside the city or county roadway project and replace our water main while they're there. So that's primarily how the water distribution system goes. So I could pause if y'all want with water, and if y'all have any questions on water before I switch to wastewater.
Mr. Book?
I think I might have, Mr. Mayor, a more generic question. It may not be for water and wastewater, probably for you, Mr. Mayor. So we talk about contractual services. In the previous one, Mr. Carroll, we saw tree trimming, and it goes up to quite a bit, 3.3 million, lime hauling services and things like that. Do we, how do we kind of internally evaluate our abilities for external vendors versus internal efficiencies?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, so I'll take a shot. So a couple of things. So when we go out for those contracts, they're competitively bid. So we go through competitive processes, look what's in the market, and pick one that's a qualified vendor that is the lower cost if they meet all the qualifications. So one, go through that process. We oftentimes, I think what you're suggesting is evaluate over time whether it's something we can do in-house. That's right. Can we, directional drilling is a good example. A couple years ago, we went through a pretty detailed analysis to determine across the utility, we do a lot of directional drilling and just, you see the picture, directional drilling is the ability to, you put in a pipe or something under the ground without digging a big trench and opening it up. You're able to put that pipe in or that facility, that conduit in with minimal disruption to the surface. So we looked at what if we brought this in-house, and what we determined at the end of that is it was close to even in terms of we be about the same cost if we were to hire multiple crews, buy all the equipment, train our folks up, and do it internally. One of the negatives of that analysis was that we wouldn't be as responsive as our vendors are to do that work. So when we had emergency work going, if we only have one crew kind of working it, that crew couldn't do 3 different jobs simultaneously, as opposed to the marketplace had the ability to cover more emergency type work. So we do analysis like that periodically to see if there's reasons to do that in-house. Some of the things historically we've done, we used to do sod ourselves, where we go down and lay down sod after we do some work. What we found was it was much more cost effective to put that out in the marketplace and have a vendor do that. Similar with asphalt work, concrete work, those are things we typically have vendors in the marketplace. But to get back to answering your questions, I think that's a periodic thing we look at. Is it better in-house or outside the house, and does it meet all of our needs? And then we do the competitive bid process when we do it out of house.
Yeah, that makes sense. Really what I was thinking was along the lines of exactly what you said. Weighing advantages and disadvantages, determining if we should be paying outside consultant or vendors for something. Not trying to take away business from private enterprise, but determining if it's something that's right in our core mission that we should be doing and weighing those costs. So that's precisely what I was asking about. So I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I see no other lights, so let's move on.
Move on to wastewater then. All right, so the wastewater budget that we'll talk about today, we'll start with O&M. So just to remind you, obviously we collect and treat wastewater from all of our customers' homes, bring it to one of 2 treatment plants with our collection system and lift stations. So we do have 2 wastewater treatment plants, Kanapahal and Main Street, 176 lift stations, 760 miles of gravity main, and then 192 of force main 46 of reclaimed water mains. So it's a large system. Same as water, we're regulated by, regulatory requirements drive our business for labor and non-labor. We do have engineering support to meet it. And on the wastewater side, we're about 84% licensed. So same statistic pretty much as our water system. Everybody is maintaining their licenses. There's a lot of training that goes into our personnel to keep that certifications up. So for the O&M budgets, again, this is a similar story to water. If you added up all the wastewater plants and lift stations, it's $11 million of the 18. So primarily, the treatment plant side and lift station side of the business is what drives the O&M budget more than the collection system. And you'll see this budget's pretty stable from years previous. We haven't had the increases we don't use as many chemicals there. We have had some slight increases, but nothing major. So I'll switch over. Like mentioned above, there's a couple of chemicals that had some small increases. Our contract hauling price for sludge disposal increased slightly, but we also reduced other expenses to try to compensate for that as much as we could. So we had an increase of $350,000. On our capital side, all of these projects are really to extend the life of the treatment facilities and the collection facilities. We are starting to get into our Main Street project, was an exception to the rule. That's, got a capacity expansion piece to it. Also the wetland park that we'll talk about, that's kind of a new and different project than the other projects listed. Of the split here, because again, engineering does manage a lot of our projects, it's hard to sometimes tell where the projects are happening at. About 17 million of this budget is at the plants and lift stations, and actually 19 million is in piping. So you might say, well, you told me Main Street was starting. What's happening is we got a lift station force main grant over the last year, and it's driving a lot of our force main projects that we had on a list. We're going to go ahead and do because we were given $4.7 million if we do $12 million worth of work. So we had a list of force mains to work through, and we have a couple of those projects that are coming up this year. So the piping side actually has quite a bit of work going on this year. So I'll get into more details on those on the next couple slides. So as we talked about, Main Street does have $8.5 million in the budget for next year. We are going to be starting phase 1 of that project, which the picture in the bottom left is our Headworks facility there. If you've been out to Main Street, that facility really needs to be replaced. It is definitely at the end of useful life and needs some work. We're also going to be building a master lift station to help us prepare. This project has been a really big challenge. We've had a lot of soul searching as to what we want the future of Main Street to be, and we had a lot of inflationary cost issues and things. So we are going to bring this project back to you guys probably hopefully early September. We'll bring it back to you guys then and just give you a larger presentation on Main Street. What we're doing right now, we did get a grant for Main Street, so we got a 50% match of $45 million if we spend it, so $22.5 million for this Main Street project, which is fantastic. So it has I think it's early 2027, it has to be done. So we are moving forward with that piece of the project, building phase 1 of Main Street, which will, like I said, involve some piping work ahead of the plant, preparing for that future expansion. So we'll bring that project back to you guys with that grant agreement that we are working with DEP on right now. Kanapaha has some projects going on too. Mostly when you see something that's a digester blower improvement, that's an energy efficiency project. We're taking an older blower that's been around and trying to bring in more efficient equipment. Lift Station 1, that is actually our largest lift station. It's located on Southwest 34th Street and 2nd, right there by the Publix and the UF Golf Course. That project is also funded by that lift station force main grant I was talking about earlier. This is just a replacement for the pumps and all the equipment there. It's a great project that we really need. That's a vital lift station for us in everyday and situations. So it's a reliability project for us. It also will be cranking up over the next year in 2024. And then in the collection system, my pictures are a little backwards here, but starting out, we talk about our lining program all the time with you guys about how important it is for us to continue to invest in our wastewater collection system and to do that lining work, which you see in the bottom picture. That is something we are doing every single year to try to increase the integrity of our pipes and reduce SSOs. So we're continuing to invest there. We do have $4.4 million in force main replacements this year, which is a little higher than usual spending on our force mains, but again, it's tied to that grant that we have, that we are working forward on 2 particular projects in '24 that money is tied to. The reclaimed water has $2 million in regional, it's part of that regional groundwater recharge wetland that we talk about. I wanted to put the new logo up so you guys have seen it and heard about it. We've called it the Southwest Nature Park and are using the logo with the, I think it's a whistling duck, if Kristen will kill me if I mess that up. But so if you see that logo, we are starting to have public meetings and stakeholder meetings, and you'll see that on flyers and things. That is the Parker Road wetland project that we are moving forward with, and there's our first public meeting in end of August. So we're super excited about that, and we're at the planning phases of that project, just starting to go through a lot of the permitting, working through the permitting. Construction won't start until late 24, early 25 on that project. So I think that is it for my slides. Any questions?
Commissioner Willetts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Main Street, we're going to start to spend in 2024. That 8.5 million, is that part of the overall $45 million?
Yes. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Thank you so much. Those are the only
All
lights.
right. Next, I think Tony Carroll's coming back to talk about gas again.
All right. Welcome back.
Oh. Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, going to talk about natural gas. And similar to energy delivery, what we do in the gas division is we take the gas from our supplier and we distribute it out to our customers in the city and also at various locations in the county. And within our group, we've got gas T&D operations, gas T&D maintenance, gas T&D construction, and energy delivery gas engineering. Okay, talk about some of the drivers of our O&M budget in fiscal year '24. And some of the big ticket items on here that you will notice are our communication services, which is $52,000. Our materials and supplies, $64,000. And also our tools and equipment, which is $79,000. You'll notice on the budget table itself for our O&M budget, there's not, actually our budget goes down from 23 to 24. And the reason why we don't have as much O&M cost, even though we've had some inflation, is because over the last 10 years, we've replaced a lot of bare steel and black plastic pipe. And so we don't have as much O&M or leaks to go out and repair. And speaking of which, there's a picture of our crews out replacing bare steel and black plastic pipe. Okay. As far as our capital budget goes, you'll see a net increase of $684,000 from 23 to 24. And I'll talk about some of our capital projects that are driving this in the upcoming slides. You'll see we've got Grand Oaks Phase 3. It's $47,000, and this work is a third phase of a residential subdivision. And it includes extending our gas main 3,580 feet. And the builder is using gas for water heating and gas furnaces. There's also Logano Phase 4 subdivision. It's approximately $37,000. And this is a residential subdivision which will include 68 new gas services for homes, and gas mains and crossings will be extended about 2,415 feet in the northwest corner of Archer Road and 91st Street. Okay, finally, another project that we have in 24, it will be $25,200, and that is the University of Florida Borer House. This project will extend gas mains within the UF campus area of Museum Road and Fraternity Road by 1,200 feet. And it will supply the New Holland Law building boilers. Okay, some other projects that we have going on that will be greater than $100,000. And that will be a gas green energy hub, which will be about $400,000. And this is where we're going to construct a point, insertion point for green energy gas, such as hydrogen or landfill gas. And in addition to that, we'll be converting a neighborhood which uses liquid propane, and we'll be converting that to natural gas. And that will be approximately $356,000. Okay, that's, any questions?
I see no lights, so
All right,
we're good. Thank you.
thank you.
So our last speaker today will be Lewis Walden. He's our telecommunications officer, and he'll talk about GRUCOM.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Walton.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you very much. I always like to start off these with just a little bit of history to make sure that people understand how a competitive business ended up squarely in the middle of a utility, right? It's a little bit different than most. So in the 1990s, GRU built a local area network land to connect substations for relay and SCADA operations across the territory because the product just wasn't available on the market. With that gap in the market, or an opportunity was recognized, and GRUCOM was created to leverage an asset that GRU owned and decided to monetize for additional income. Since then, we're going the wrong way. There we go. Excuse me. Since that time, GRUCOM has grown to a network of over 600 miles of fiber optic cable with hundreds of state-of-the-art electronic devices in the field, serving hundreds of customers, including large-scale government and institutional customers, other telecommunications carriers, over 40 multi-dwelling unit developments, and many small business customers across Alachua County. This system provides unparalleled connectivity throughout our community and interconnections to locations around the world. So that gives you some idea of some of the areas of responsibility that GRUCOM has. We're the area's only all fiber optic network with interconnection to locations around the world, providing enterprise scale networking and communications, very different from your local cable company. We have ownership management and network transport service for the 13 cell towers. We connect every school with private state-of-the-art 10 gig network. And connects the largest local businesses with dedicated networks to satellite businesses across the state of Florida. When looking at these areas of responsibility for GRUCOM, there is a tremendous amount of unseen infrastructure and effort that includes cable routed overhead and underground across many other communities, regional utilities, easements, you name it. Critical electronics to deliver the highest levels of service available in the market. 13 cell tower facilities with interconnectivity to worldwide providers of telecommunications services. And then there's the power, the backup power, seamless integrated switching, air conditioning, security, and sophisticated property management to monetize that facility and services available that goes into each one of those locations. All of this is then connected and integrated through our local central office that takes that traffic and hands it directly to major hubs in Atlanta and Miami for superior speed, redundancy, and reliability that is required by our customers. And then there are the 36 awesome employees that, and my favorite part, that design, build, manage, monitor the services 24/7, support our customers 24/7, repair, and then independently bill for the services we provide our customers. It's pretty complex for a handful of employees. Of course, this is all reflected in the major drivers of our expenses seen here. Talented employees is an investment that we have. We need people who can be available and are qualified to help. Support contracts for carrier services. When you've got the level of electronics that we have out in the field, you need backup. You need people who really know the equipment inside and out and can make changes to it on the fly. Geographically diverse and robust carrier class connectivity. That requires interacting with other carriers and making sure that we're connected in ways that are not only redundant, but resilient to any events that may take place. Technology renewal is the next driver, right? These electronics last for a certain amount of time, and then they come in and go out of support. And we end up in cycles where we have to go back and replace that in order to continue to get the performance out of it. In our case, this year, drivers influencing the FY24 budget are expense reductions to improve GRUCOM's financial position. The sale of the public radio system has played a big impact in the budget. Purchase circuits for us are something that we have been working on to lower expenses with, and budget and network management software upgrades to that so we can really see our network and what's happening in all the components at any given time helps us manage that. So what you're gonna see as we go forward is more detail on mostly the cuts that have taken place, and that we've planned and put ourselves in a position to not impact service at the end of the day. So here are some of the details on some of the steps that we've taken to reduce our ongoing operating expenses across the board. The TRS system sale was able to cut about $1.4 million in O&M expenses. Transport circuits, we were able to renegotiate, savings of $255,000. Hardware support, renegotiated to save around $55,000. Training and travel, we've been able to delay that and split that up between some of the different folks so that we can defer $77,000 there. Another $72,000 in equipment and $36,000 in professional services and temporary employment that's been eliminated to get us to around $2 million in savings overall at this point. And here you see our overall O&M budget comparisons of FY23 to FY24 that show the detail and the 21% cuts. But again, based on planning and contingencies we've built into this plan, we do not anticipate these cuts impacting our level of service to customers. As a matter of fact, in some ways, they're going to help it improve it. You know, I mentioned that unseen infrastructure and the people running it. And this is a look inside of our central office where we currently are completing an overhaul of the electric uninterrupted power supply, battery backup, switch gear, air conditioning, dual feeds coming in, and true A and B power redundancy into and throughout the facility. This was one of our most significant capital projects in this past year. It's been in the planning stages for years, and it's going to improve reliability by leaps and bounds, which is important considering that half of this facility enables our most critical connectivity, and the other half houses many businesses, servers in a co-location arrangement where they rely on the same enhanced features of that building. This investment represents some of our capital budget expenses from FY23, and we can transition into our capital budget needs for FY24. Here's a brief look at these. We'll get into detail on the next slide. But capital's being reduced about half. As I mentioned, last year we took on that significant capitally intensive project on refurbishing the central office. And so we're looking at about half of that being reduced. Also, there's one item here that, based on the timing of our submissions as we went through on the trunked radio system, that would be eliminated because we're going to be in a position to sell that service on to Alachua County as we look forward. Here's a little more detail into what's going into the into some of the capital notes. Replacement of legacy switching equipment to improve support and performance at GatorNet sites. Network operations, we have a cold spare router as a replacement in case of failure and malfunction. It's effectively the gateway through which all of the internet flows in and out of the city of Gainesville for us. And having a cold spare on property that's effectively ready to go and be plugged in will help us in the event of any malfunctions or outages there. We also have a proactive plant upgrade, which is systematic for us, fiber or electronics to relieve constraints and improve performance in sections of the network from time to time after you've routed different businesses through different avenues. Some areas can become congested and you deployed equipment to make that run more smoothly. Customer operations, this is the one I mentioned earlier about updating a system that monitors the status of GRUCOM's entire environment, servers, power systems, all network elements. It even gives our customers insight into some of these systems as well. So that's going to be a great tool for us to continue to manage the network and also to share information with customers as things change. Are there any questions on the on some of the details of our planning so far?
I don't see any lights.
Great. So that completes the details of that proposed budget. Now that we've touched on some of the financial challenges facing GRUCOM, so I'd like to touch or focus on the overall direction for GRUCOM heading into 2024. What you see here is the status up there is the theme. Overall expenses are increasing beyond revenues. Never a good thing, right? The action plan that we have, we've talked in depth about the sale of TRS system. That's going to bring us $8 million, and it's going to allow us to also reduce some operating expenses going forward. It also balances out with a loss in revenue as well, but that revenue is matched up on a cost basis, so we actually get to retain some too. Expanding services and increasing revenues is something we've talked about before. I'm a little hesitant to talk about what those are up here because it's a competitive environment, and we have competitors out there that I'm sure are listening as well. We're talking about evaluating bringing corporate network into the organization as a corporate expense, a shared services model. I'll get into the details of some of these here in just one second because I want you to have an understanding of that. Of course, lowering expenses across the organization is going to be important too. That's the mantra that we've taken on at this point, to be as efficient as possible. And what that means is that during this time that we are making these evaluations, we'll be drawing down the reserves of some of the other systems to handle some of the expenses for GRUCOM going forward until we can make those changes. Okay, a little bit more detail. GRUCOM's relatively, this is the first one, the overall expenses. GRUCOM's relatively flat revenue growth is not keeping up with the overall expense obligations for the business. Although GRUCOM's work to significantly reduce operating expenses, budget projections show a widening deficit between expected revenues coverage of overall expenses, including shared corporate services, debt service, UPIF, and the GSC. GRU management has worked over the last year plus to evaluate options to improve GRUCOM's position while still trying to balance the needs of the rest of the utility and the other systems. The sale of TRS is going to provide us the $8 million towards GRUCOM's debt and will need to be completed to materialize this benefit. As you know, we're shooting for an August completion of that and closing before October 1st. That still remains on track. Selling the system also significantly reduces our ongoing O&M expenses for the system. As I mentioned, it also reduces revenues. Expand services and increase revenues. GRUCOM revenue growth is imperative to improve the financial performance of the system and provide a dividend to GRU. The competitive telecommunications market provides both challenges and opportunities for revenue growth, and GRUCOM must continue to implement products and services to improve the bottom line. Evaluating bringing the corporate network into organization as a corporate expense shared service model, something we've been looking at for some time. Fundamentally, GRUCOM is a business enterprise created by GRU to monetize the original core fiber network built by the electric system. That original network is embedded in GRUCOM, along with all of the support personnel and infrastructure to operate the system, and not only for GRU, but for the hundreds of other customers that we provide service to. At the end of the day, many of those employees and infrastructure they operate are mandatory to operate the network, even if there were no other customers than GRU or the city. We are currently evaluating how that core group and infrastructure expense may be proportionately internalized to GRU, such as IT, customer service, et cetera, that are shared services to the larger utility. And that's something that y'all are familiar with through our other budget processes, right? And unfortunately, under the current circumstances, GRUCOM's shortfall is and has recently been funded through the other systems. A lot of work by GRU staff has gone into identifying options and initiatives to correct this condition and implement plans to mitigate this adverse trend going forward. That's the overview of the GRUCOM budget. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I don't see any lights, so thank you.
Thank you. Brett, I think
All right. I want to close this out. So one, hopefully, as General Manager mentioned earlier, is our goal was to get more in detail about our operational areas, what we do, how we support both achieving the GRU's mission and how that relates to the overarching goals for the city. So just to reiterate some things I said at the beginning of the presentation. So here we are on the 24th, providing our specific operational area, operation and maintenance and capital budget details. Those that information feeds into the overarching budgeting process and the financial model that goes into establishing rates. So we originally, again, thought we were going to do the O&M and capital in 2 presentations. We decided to make it a longer one-day presentation. So we're not planning on using the 31st unless we need to. And then we'll be coming back on August 9th to kind of show how all those incremental steps starting back in February kind of culminate into our budgeting process.
Very good.
Okay.
So I don't see, again, any of the lights. I will remind everyone this is a more extensive opportunity for us to understand where the money is being spent than we traditionally had. And there are a variety of reasons for that, and I really appreciate you all, staff, for bringing this forward. And I appreciate that several of you have spent a lot of time with us in our offices, allowing questions to be asked. And I think the community benefits from all of that, so thank you. Okay, all right, that's all we have for this, Madam Clerk.
Next item is member comment.
Member comment, Commissioner Willits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all of GRU staff who did work and taught us and really showed us what this is coming up, particularly in this budgetary experience of what we're looking at in the next 10 years. This was really instructive. But in my comment, I want to go back to our gas rebates. I think we're still headed down the wrong road with these gas rebates, but this kind of firmed it up for me when we look at, and Grand Oaks is in my district, but when we're talking about homes that start in the low 400,000s, and we bring them on, and we spend some money to run gas pipes out to them, but then we give people money for those gas appliances. In the long run, it may be good for the bottom dollar. I don't think it's good for the planet in the long run, particularly for people who probably, when they're buying homes in the low 400,000s, though it's hard to find anything much cheaper than that. Those are people who can probably pay for their own appliances, or could be convinced, hey, why don't you put in your own solar panels? I know that long term that's also an issue for our electric supply, or our bottom line as well. But I just want to reiterate that I think we made the wrong decision on those gas rebates. I really think we should have looked at that, and I think it's the problem with looking at that long term is that it still means that the expense comes now. The expense is paid now by the people who are paying now for that long term, and I still think we made the wrong decision on that. The other neighborhood, Lugano, is outside of the city. Even smaller homes, but probably for about the same price, starting off 400,000, 375,000. So I just wanted to mention where we're talking about when we talk about those gas rebates for some of those that are outside of our normal electric service area, or outside of the city in particular. That's what we're talking about, so I just wanted to reiterate that in my comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I see no other lights. To my knowledge, unless somebody asked for it, we don't have a need to meet on the 31st on this, Mr. General Manager. We've covered everything. We do have an item on this Thursday's general policy agenda that is a placeholder for GRU issues. If we need to make decisions on that day, we do have an item available there on the agenda. If we don't, it's okay to not do anything with that. Just because the placeholder is there does not mean that we have to do anything with it. But I thought better to be prepared than otherwise. So if I don't hear from anyone else here, we will.
Thank you to all the staff.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate all of you being here and being available with your time. And again, that's good for the community. So we are adjourned. Thank you.